Let's talk about the court case. Let's talk about the consequences and more on the battle for our borders and for enforcing our immigration laws. To do that, we are pleased to be joined once again by former INS officer Michael Cutler, Skyping in from New York City. Michael, as always, it's so good to have you here on America's Forum.
JD, as always, it's a privilege to join you. And let me start out by wishing you, those close to you, and your audience out there a very happy, healthy, safe, and peaceful New Year.
And yet, for those of us who advocate consistent enforcement of our borders, it appears that 2015 may be worse than 2014. The state I represented in Congress, Arizona, now hearing from a federal judge that the state has to issue driver's licenses to illegals. Your take on that case, sir?
Well, this is catastrophic for national security. First of all, we keep hearing it's about young people. The age cutoff is 31. To use that dirty word profiling, if you look at the profile of the average terrorist, we're talking about a foreign national under the age of 30, 31. That seems to be the usual age cutoff for the folks out there that would do violent acts in the street, committed hijacking and so forth. The idea of providing identity documents to people whose identities can't be verified, and then for them to be able to take those identity documents improperly, in my judgment, given to them by the Department of Homeland Surrender, as I've come to call DHS, so that the state of Arizona is now compelled to take at face value those identity documents is insanity. It violates the findings and recommendations of the 9/11 Commission, to which, by the way, I provided testimony. It violates common sense. And all that it does is make a mockery of our immigration laws. But there's one quick question. I'm going to turn the table and ask you a question, JD. Why in the world do we bother with a costly inspections process at ports of entry when our own government says it's not a big deal to run the border? According to the budget, DHS requested $3.3 billion to carry out those inspections at ports of entry, and yet we're told by leadership from both the Democrat and Republican parties in Congress that it doesn't matter how these folks get here. Once they're here, they have some kind of an entitlement to lawful status and perhaps a pathway to citizenship. Why are we bothering to inspect people at all?
And as you ask me the question, I will offer the answer that I offered, 8 years ago in the book I authored, Whatever It Takes? The tragedy of Washington for the establishment leadership of both parties is that they seek a political solution, or they seek a political kind of timeout on something that should be considered a clear threat to national security and a threat to our legal system, as we failed to provide equal justice under law and set up an excused underclass of people coming in here illegally. A minute remains in the segment. I'll give you the last word on what I had to say.
No, I agree. So here's my analogy to help folks wrap their brain around it. Imagine when I drive to D.C. and you get on the turnpike, there's a cash lane and an easy pass lane. Imagine if there was a third lane that said, no speed limit, free. What sane, reasonable person would bother going through either of the other two lanes? And isn't that what we're now doing with our immigration system?
And the tragedy of the situation is the simple observation that is the antithesis of what you set up. If laws are enforced, then laws are obeyed. But sadly, neither this president nor the incoming Republican leadership of the next Congress appears to be inclined to actually enforce laws on the books. Michael Cutler, this is such a major, vexing problem with so many implications. We're going to ask you to stay right there, and we'll continue the conversation with Michael Cutler. We'll ask you to stay with us as well as America's Forum continues here on Newsmax TV.